I'm Parker Duffey with Tailgate Guys, and I'm coming to you here with Athletic Director U. And I've got 3 guests here today, all deputy ADs. I've got Benko from Mississippi State, I've got DeWayne Peevy from Kentucky, and Neff from Clemson. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Right.
Welcome to Athletic Director U. All right, so this is something that we talked about a good bit with the guys from ADU about the deputy AD role. Is something that, you know, as Tailgate Guys, we tend to interact with the deputy ADs a good bit. Obviously, we have a working relationship, so we talk a good bit too. But it's a position that, to me, I've been a little bit intrigued with. It's something that, you know, I think I know it, I don't know it, but at the same time, it's one of the more understated roles probably in an athletic department. So, Jerry, I'm going to start with you on the end over here. Explain to us, what are some of the misconceptions that go on about what the deputy AD really does? And like I said, I think I know, but I don't know. So what is it out there that we don't know that you guys really have on your plate?
Yeah, I think it's easy to look at it from an internal and external constituent standpoint. I think an external constituent standpoint, sometimes people think we hire coaches and watch ball games, and that consists of most of our job. And that is true, some of it, but obviously we have a lot more responsibilities. I think internally, one of the things that people don't always know is the amount of decisions you have to make on a daily basis and how fast those decisions are coming to you on a daily basis. And so it can, if you let it, it can snowball effect a little bit on you. But yeah, I think just the amount of decisions and the influence you have on a day-to-day basis are really understated at times.
Yeah.
I'll jump on that, not to jump to Dwayne, but just on the decision-making side of things, obviously we work very closely with our athletic directors, but we don't always agree. Dan and I don't always agree on things. I mean, they're like that healthy.
A necessary.
Yeah. I mean, it's important to be, united front just from a leadership team and a senior staff, but like that healthy contrarian conversations, I think, are really important, whether that's behind closed doors, and I think even to some extent when it's a bigger group, just to, have some dialogue so that it's not just always the voice of the AD and now we're executing, but that there's really good conversation around a decision to be made.
Yeah.
I think that's, I agree with both of them on that. It's a big part of the role. But I think one of the misconceptions is that we're really trying to get in that chair, no matter where it is, in such a hurry. Like we're constantly thinking about the next job.
Yeah.
I mean, we really can't do our jobs well if we're focusing on that. And I think that's the biggest thing. We're really there to help our department, help our athletic director in any way possible, because the best scenario for us is if that goes well.
Right.
It takes care of itself.
How many years have you been deputy?
Now since 2013, so I guess this is my 6th year.
6, 7 years, yeah.
Yeah.
You've been
15. Yeah.
15 years since you were 8 years old. Yeah.
2015.
Yeah.
I was really young. I came out just like right.
You're a savant. What about you, Jerry?
A little over 2 years.
Yeah.
And to Graham's point too, I think the other piece that goes understated as well is the managing up piece. He mentioned talking to Dan. I think that's the piece where, our ADs, and I can't speak for everybody, I know John Cohen is I think one of the best in the country. I mean, he has a lot on his plate.
Yeah.
And so we have to filter out what's important and what decisions do we feel comfortable making a decision on that he delegates to us versus, hey, this needs to I need to bounce this off him and kind of get his thoughts. And I think that's the piece too, that it's kind of give and take. Filling out at least initially. So
it's really important too, like the managing up, and so our guys, athletic directors, need to know the decisions that we are being made, or even if they are delegated to us to, hey, Jared, Dwayne, go handle this project. I think, Dan really emphasizes the horizontal communication as well. So yes, it's important that we're managing up and having those communication skills, but the side to side, the rest of the senior staff, the rest of the staff, internal to the department, maybe even external to the campus community, the fact that communication circle needs to be well maintained and well circulated is I think a really important part of our communication element of our jobs.
I think that's y'all spot on with that, the managing up part of it, and even, I don't have the responsibility on my plate that the guys that y'all work with do, at that athletic director position, but at the same time, my senior team, I look to them to manage up all the time. I look to them to guide me. So that's pretty consistent, like you and I were talking about. It's the same thing. There's so many similarities between the private sector and what you guys do as essentially the COOs of y'all's athletic departments.
Would you say a lot of your contacts are from a AD stand? Like, how do you guys go about understanding who, to Jared's point, decision makers are?
Yeah.
And it's different every place, but how do you get a sense of that? Not to flip it on you.
No, but it is completely different, and that person really steps forward in the conversations to where we all have working relationships, but in some way, shape, or form, we've all had communication because you guys are the decision makers in our space. But some places you might go, it might be a senior associate AD, and some places the athletic director really is involved in what they want to accomplish with game day experience. I mean, it's changing completely, but Most of the times, it really is a deputy, though, because y'all are usually involved with the business functions. You know, there's so much. Well, actually, y'all are all generalists, so you have to know a lot about a lot.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
Exactly.
For sure.
Hey, that's a great segue, actually. All right, so we just said what we were talking about is you guys being generalists and really having to know a lot about a lot. DeWayne, I'm going to start with you on this one. So, as the deputy, you do have to know a lot about a lot. You have to be that generalist. You have to be the COO. What is it out there that you just don't know enough about right now?
I think the biggest thing that helped me is that, you know, I've been at Kentucky in a lot of different roles, and coming from the media relations side, you get to work with so many departments.
Right.
So by the time I got in my deputy role, I pretty much knew all the different, a little bit about a lot of things, you know, enough to be dangerous, so to speak. But I think that's anything. I think just like if you're a student athlete, a coach, or an athletic director, you're trying to get better at everything constantly. There's nothing I shouldn't be working on. Just like we tell our student athletes, they need to work on their craft, they need to work on their game. Yeah. I think as I got into this bigger leadership role, because you're always a leader in some way, shape, or form, I started thinking about more specifically learning to be a better leader. Yeah. So I would look at, just say, the last 3 years. I mean, I've done an NCAA leadership program. I've done some executive coaching. I'm currently pursuing my master's, doing an executive MBA program. Yeah. So obviously I'm taking a lot bigger steps now just to, in total, be more complete for my current job. Yeah. It's not about the future, but it's so much more that I can help with the staff, or to help me think bigger picture with Mitch, or envision myself, if I'm him, what would I want my deputy AD to help me more with? You know, just to think that way. So it's a lot of that. Yeah.
I'll jump off that. The one thing that I've really come to realize, certainly at Clemson, but so much from an athletic director standpoint, the politics of a place, not from like a backroom standpoint, but just the nuance of campus leadership, the presidential decision makings that are going on, board leadership. That is so frontal lobe, not guiding a decision, but just context for a decision and just kind of day to day. And Clemson is fantastic as it relates to just that leadership alignment. So there are certainly other places that I would imagine are more politicky in that regard. My point is, like, having that nuance or understanding of kind of the sense of what that looks like. And it looks different at Clemson than it does in Lexington, than it does in Starkville, of course. But I just think having that, I don't know, understanding that nuance, I'm thinking of a better word, but to help add questions or perspectives to Dan as he's going through a decision that's going to have wide-ranging scope as it's rolled out, perhaps.
Yeah, and I'll pivot off that. You think about, Joe Castiglione earlier today was talking about being a continuous learner, and that's something I think all of us would share, and I think that's part of our responsibility to keep learning, and part of that's industry trends, and part of that's getting better ourselves. And coming up, we all came up to the Power 5 route, and part of those challenges is easy to get siloed off with whether you come up in the communications or the business side like Graham and I did. And so when you become a deputy, you have a chance to kind of expand your purview and be on the external side and the fundraising piece. And so I think you have to be really intentional with how to, really self-assessment wise. I think we all are probably our hardest critics at times, and how do you become more well-rounded? And ultimately, more importantly, how do you help the department? How do you help the university? And those can run parallel with each other. So like,
for example, then, like, you have a few examples that of what you're working on to really improve on those things? Because I know that it's very broad in a sense, but it makes sense. So that everybody's working on getting better as a leadership, and obviously understanding the nuances on campus. That's ever changing. I'm sure it is. Like, there's people coming in and coming out of the political scene on all your campuses out there. But what is it that you can really do to stay out in front of it? And I say that because I'm sure there's a lot of young guys out there going to be watching this. They're going to be guys and girls. They're going to be in y'all's position very soon.
Well, I think part of it's having the humility to say, I don't have all the answers, right? And so I think that's really important to listen and learn, but we can bring value. And I think just recently, I think a lot very highly of Clemson and Kentucky's external team. We created a creative strategy division, and we think that's going to promote more cross-pollination across our external team. And so having a hand in that really was a cool experience. And the other piece too is we're constantly, it's the arms race, right? And these guys have a lot of great facilities at their institutions, and we're getting ready to. We just did Dudy Noble. We think it's the best baseball stadium in the country, and we're getting ready to start on the Humphrey Coliseum expansion. And so with that, there's a major gift component, and we have again an incredible Bulldog Club fundraising team, and working alongside them with mapping that out and having some ask out there and secured some major gifts. I mean, that's an experience that is really hard as you're climbing the ranks to break outside and get that experience. And so that's been something that, again, intentional on our end to do that. So,
Duty Noble is the best in the country, from what I've seen. Back to some of the campus climate maybe that I was talking on, I think there's typically opportunity for us to have exposure from a campus leadership standpoint. Dan allows me to join the president's cabinet team when he's maybe out of town for conferences, and again, you just get really good perspective from understanding the goings-ons with the other VPs on campus, deans, certainly our board of trustees, of how those things are at play institutionally, and certainly we talk a lot about athletics being front porch and those type of things, but we are just one auxiliary unit of a $1 billion+ organization. Right. And so just that wherewithal of campus operations, and then therefore how athletics can support or help or just operate within those contexts is really important. So that engagement from those campus leadership teams and where that finds itself is something that it's worthwhile for us to seek for sure.
How much do you guys interact? Sorry, DeWayne, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, when I started out my path, I was an accounting major that ended up being in media relations. It wasn't the yellow brick road that's supposed to lead to this, but when I look back, it probably gave me a little bit of an advantage because on our campus, like you were talking about with just some of the campus constituents, with the board trustees and things of that nature, I've been so involved with them, being in my old role, as a head of our crisis management team and being on all the PR side, that when I got in this role now, filling in for Mitch on, president's meetings and things of that nature, these are a bunch of people that I know I've already had relationships with that I never would have thought at that time if I was in another role that would have been important for me down the road. So it's amazing because we're in such a people business, right? You get into it and I mean, you get out of it what you put into it. So if you put more time into, your staff or your peers or just other people and ways of life, we can all learn from each other. We do it amongst each other too. We're calling each other about different things. Then it allows us, when we have those opportunities, all that experience comes in handy.
I think one last thing too, I think the appreciation for what each of our director of athletics go through on a daily basis. I mean, the demands both time-wise and just the constant attention that everything they do is looked at microscopically. And so I think that appreciation, I think seeing it day-to-day wise is something that you get a greater respect for. So.
What you just said really segued very well. It's like you're just teeing these things up for me. Actually.
You guys worked on that.
That's why we were a little bit late.
Partnership. I'm impressed.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's what you get.
I'm impressed. DeWayne's moonlighting in the business office. Accounting undergrad. Right.
All right. So you talked about your path then, and so the next thing I really want to ask is, all of you guys have a really unique path of how you got here. But I want you to go back about 10 years, and I want to know how specific you guys really were on your path. And you're going to lead this one, Graham, and really how aligned that path has really been, your path has been with that plan, and where it might have split.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Think back 10 years, gosh, had a plan, golly, mapped it out, whatever, for sure. I would tell you that really probably flipped for me. Not to get into all my background, but was at Georgia Tech for a while and in Middle Tennessee. I went to my role at Middle Tennessee when I was young. I was 25, worked for Chris Massaro, who is a mentor still to this day. Being so young for the decision maybe that I moved into, thought I'd be there for 5+, 7+ years, just get settled. We love the area. My wife's from the area. So just imagine being there for quite a while. Opportunity at Clemson came much sooner than maybe I was thinking, and it was really important to me that the scales were balanced. Obviously, it was an opportunity that made a bunch of sense, and I had a relationship with Dan, and so did Chris, and it was a great transition. My point in just that background is, I don't know, I think sometimes timing, it's important to have a plan for sure, but timing gets fleeting, and at some point, like if you do put times or years, maybe if it comes too soon and it's an awesome opportunity, or if you're maybe behind schedule, whatever that may be, now you get anxious or antsy or frustrated and those type of things that I know we all have friends that are maybe have that type of mindset. So I don't know, I think timing is maybe a thing that I would say that I've tried to remove from my planning. But I think responsibility, kind of future forecasting of just equipping myself with skill sets and things like that, one of your earlier questions, that's probably what I think more along the lines of a path ahead versus, mapping out years here, years there.
Well, just like to your point, DeWayne, that you made about being focused on the job at hand and not looking for that next step and just really serving the school you're there. I mean, that's the job right there. So.
Right. We have enough challenges every day. We don't need to frustrate ourselves. Yeah. I mean, 10 years ago, I was sitting there thinking when you asked that question, I think we had just hired a new basketball coach, John Calipari at the time. Yeah, okay. I was creating a Twitter account. I was so I definitely wasn't thinking about this job, but I mean, think about just concentrating on doing your job well, right? Focusing on that. That's what I tell our young people all the time. They've got all these visions. They already want to map out where they go. It's good to kind of have some goals, but it's not going to usually go the way you plan, so you better be able to be adaptable. But I think the biggest thing is by concentrating on being really good at your job, that's when people notice you. Yeah. Because I never talked to Mitch one time about even wanting to go in athletic administration when I was in my role. Next thing you know, Rob Mullins goes to Oregon. Mark Cole at the time goes to Boise State. And Mitch calls me in his office and said, hey, what do you think about being the men's basketball administrator? I mean, it happened like that.
That was the fork in the road for you.
I didn't even have a chance to see the vision. He saw it before I did. And so I think that's why you don't know. And I think, but the biggest thing was just thinking about the challenges you have in front of you. I can't imagine anybody at our schools that don't have anything to do. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's really big about how you make your current situation, your current department, the people around you better, and the rest will come.
Mitch saw how good you were with that Twitter account, man.
That's what it was, the Twitter account. Popped it in.
Yeah, similar to Graham, I think back, I was at University of Georgia and had ambition and be obtuse to sit here and say that, hey, it'd take me to 3 other schools in the conference. I think
the same conference, that's right.
The same conference, yes. And but I'll tell you, the cool thing about the experience is each of the places I've been at is I've been blessed with some of the great mentors. And there's people that invested time in me, quite honestly, that they probably could have spent their time better elsewhere, you know. And I think that I'm a byproduct of people, one, being blessed, but two, having people that invested time in me. And so, we talk about talking to young people. I think one of the challenges sometimes is we're such a competitive space that we think about, it's easy to benchmark ourselves against our peers indirectly at times. And what I tell our young people all the time that have ambition to be ADs, that, hey, when you retire at 55, 60, 65, you're not going to look back and say, man, when I was 26 or 27, I should have stayed at school A or B, a year less or a year more. Right. And I just think you have to look at it in totality. And I think that, a lot of times you're talking about bloom where you're planted and stuff like that. And I think you've got to excel at your job and be the best at your profession, because whether you're in communications or the business office or fundraising, until you become the best of that sector, it's going to be hard to become an AD.
Yeah. DeWayne, you led off in the first portion of the conversation on there's the idea or the notion that, like, oh gosh, like we're all aching or ready or next, and I know Jared gets it all the time in Starkville, but oh Jared, you're not going to be here long, like you're going to be an AD next, and we all get it, and that's nice and flattery, but it's just like, gosh, like, no, we love Clemson, I want to be here at Clemson, I want to do my job here at Clemson.
I do think that y'all have some of the best jobs in the country, really. I think the deputy AD role, like when I started, I said it's understated. And it's like I said, I'm intrigued by it because you guys, you have so much influence and such responsibility on your plates. But at the same time, that pressure and the scrutiny that the AD fly, like they sit up there and y'all are able to really keep your head down and really make things happen.
Yeah, one last thing too, is about advice to young people, because I know it seems a bit without being overstated, but it's really important who you work for. And really aligning yourself with good people, because they're going to have a big influence in all your development, but also your future. And so I think that, I know each of us work for some of the best ADs in the country, and I think that you're talking about enjoying our jobs, so much of that is who you work with and who you work for. So.
Yeah, I think, like I talked about that focus part, and even in our roles now, we've got to stay focused on what our job is at hand. I remember I was up for the UCF jobs. First AD interview I ever done, it was 2015. And I didn't get the job. So it was right at the end, you don't get it. And for about a month there, I was a little lost because I knew what my job was, I knew what my focus was, and that kind of threw me off a little bit for a minute there. Like, do I go on another interview? But as soon as I got right back to what my core values were, what my focus was, all that went away. Yeah. And then you realize what helped you get to that interview spot in the first place. Mm-hmm. And so I've never got to that point again, but it took that lesson because I was wondering why I was so frustrated and then I wasn't motivated. But then I realized, okay, well, that's what happened. Yeah. It's like I got away from my focus.
Yeah, that's probably a good lesson, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, a chance also to get back and be a positive change agent for our student athletes. I mean, ultimately, that's the great thing is being in a position where you can have influence on our student athletes and staff. I mean, you can make that impact as soon as you get back to campus. Right. So.
You just teed me up the next question from me now too. So let's talk about student athletes for a second and just all that's going on in college sports. There's a lot of big changes that we're seeing on the horizon right now, and a lot of steps you guys are having to take in your shoes to really stabilize and prepare for what's coming with the naming and the name and likeness and the FBI, all those things that are going on. And you spoke to this earlier about the campus relationships. So there's so much. I want to know how much you guys interact with your peers in other departments. But Jared, we'll start back with you. We'll just keep going down this cycle right here. How much do you guys get inbound questions from your peers in on-campus departments about what all that's going on in sports with the naming, the likeness, the FBI stuff that's going on right now? And how do you communicate across the board what you guys are doing to take steps to
Well, I think both these guys kind of touched on earlier. One, thinking about what our ADs do and the relationships they have, and obviously respecting those, understanding it's better to be proactive than reactive, and I think that's really important. Also, too, DeWayne touched on just those relationships across campus. If you have those relationships across campus, it's just kind of a different topic, and so part of it is it's not, hey, we're coming to you and here's kind of a proactive education. No, it's that continuing dialogue, and so I think back a couple of years ago we had the whole training table change and the implications of that, and sometimes it's financial implications, sometimes it's procedural implications. So I think holistically it goes back to those relationships on campus are critical across the aisle, not just in athletics, but obviously, student affairs, financial affairs. You get on a list, Title IX, and you can go to a list of offices. And so I think if you have those relationships, you can be pretty nimble in the space and say, hey, here's something we're here, and hey, this is something you need to think about, and this is how it can impact A, B, and C. I think those are just kind of really important relationships to have ultimately for stuff like this.
Are y'all getting those questions right now? Are people across campus asking those?
I think we're spoiled a little bit because we have such good presidents and chancellors and athletic directors that have relationships, because at Kentucky, we don't have those silos. So we're talking all the time to not be surprised on each side. I mean, they're letting us in on things that they're dealing with that, we don't want to be, usually by the time we hear about it, we already discussed some of those things. And so I think that's the biggest thing is that, Dr. Capilouto and Mitch Barnhart, they've kind of let both of their departments, so from a campus-wide thing, we have a collaborative effort. We talk all the time. We share a lot of insight. So none of this is really new. We've been kind of discussing these things because they're getting feedback from things that we might not touch. Mm-hmm. And so it allows us, like you said, whether it's the training table changes or what everybody's doing in student-athlete experience, well, they've been dealing with those problems on campus of not just graduation rates, but what are their what the other kids on campus are doing. So I think that's part of it. It's just really communicating, over-communicating, just, there's no taboo topic to talk about.
Right. I have to catch myself sometimes in remembering that from an outside perspective, from a campus perspective, kind of I think your question, we're the experts. Not like from a deputy role. We work in the athletic department. We're as much of an expert maybe as our director of ticketing. So the fact that we work in an athletic department, there's the expectation maybe, or at least that, hey, Graham, Jared, Dwayne's going to know something, what's going on with name, image, likeness. My point is, so much of that is, as you said, nimble, changing every day. Gene Smith and Val Ackerman's committee, we just heard from Bob Bowlesby, there's so much that we're not in the rooms for. We're not necessarily in the league-wide AD meetings or the Lead One meetings that just happened. And so I think the importance of the communication that Dan, at least for me, has me, we talk about those things all the time. So I do feel equipped and up to date to the extent that he is, to the extent that I'm able to understand of some of those landscape changes in our world, just because, again, we are the experts. And then I think there's some sort of a perception, rightfully so, we're just talking about the busyness of athletic directors, that, oh gosh, Dan's not available, or he's too busy, or he's out of town, and a lot of it legitimately. And so a lot of times, those questions or hey, what's going on kind of things do funnel to our seats. Right. And so there is the need for us to be speak from a chair of understanding, and we're perceived experts, but we need to really understand to the extent we're able what is going on, so that we can educate and equip our institution, our campus leadership of the changes in our world that are going to have those type of rollouts to campus world.
Right. All right, y'all want an easy one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we talked about this. We're going to kind of pivot a little bit. So y'all have all said that, focusing on the job, focusing on the chair that you're in right now, but I want to shift a little bit, and all of y'all's names have surfaced. We've all read about the jobs that have been open, and y'all have all been in those conversations at some point. So DeWayne, I want to start with you on this one. If you could describe the perfect institution and what those characteristics really are for if and when you step into that AD chair, what are some of those characteristics?
I thought this was the easy one.
That is easy.
Well, I mean,
Just start with zip code.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Let's talk about school colors.
Are they tailgate guy partners yet or not?
Yeah, exactly. What are we going to do?
Yeah, we think about those things all the time. Yeah. Campus that already has tailgate guys relationship.
No, we need to go one where you're not, so we can do a new deal together.
I think the biggest thing is really having president or chancellor that you can partner with, you know, that you have, you know, somebody that, I mean, it's a two-way street from a recruiting standpoint. You want some place that you're a good fit, but also they are as well. But I think someone that you can be aligned with on what your values are. And I think for me, it's, you know, I want a place where I know honesty and integrity is valued. Obviously, being involved in the community is important to me, and so someplace I want to be able to do that, but also have leadership on campus that can have a vision and see the big picture, because I'm used to being able to have the wherewithal to be able to think a little bigger than the current situation. And I'm not talking about from a monetary standpoint, but not be settled on this is just the way it's going to be and don't want to change. I mean, that's probably not a good fit for me.
Yeah.
Ditto, president, absolutely, for sure. That's an easy one. You know, we talked timing earlier and career progression. You know, we have kids. Like, where can you be for a decade? You know, where can
exactly.
My
Y'all are all
kids
family men. You have to think about that stuff.
3 and one, 2 of them at one. Where can they graduate high school? You know, like it's a little. I think you have to have that type of horizon, maybe, just because, like, gosh, you don't know, like, you know, what career paths look like, what, you know, bloom where you planted, and don't mess with happiness. So I think all those things of just like the local community piece is huge. I think a lot about trajectory, just from an institutional standpoint, you know, a community area, and then therefore how can athletics be part of that trajectory, or what's the trajectory like existing for athletics, or where can you maybe impact some change to change that line? So there's so much that goes into that, of course, and you know, so we have these type of, gosh, it's got to be a right fit, and, you know, being very picky, and with that, the other notion of, like, hard jobs to get, right? I mean, there's 120 something in the FBS, and you know, so that's just always a balance that I think we have to reconcile for sure.
Yeah, I think sometimes our fit is predicated on our experiences, right? And so I think at Mississippi State, again, very blessed. I mean, I think Dr. Keenum is one of the best presidents in the country. And so that embracement of the competitive excellence, both academically and athletically, is really important as well. So agree both those guys. But I think going to a place where you can excel as a student athlete in the classroom, obviously on the playing fields, on the playing courts, and also too, more obviously preparing those individuals for life after sports. And to me, it sounds great, but I think trying to find those fits, especially when you're in the Power Five, and yeah, it's really competitive in our conferences, and so I think it's trying to find that fit that addresses both of those needs. And last thing too, you think about the number of fits, I think you also have to think about the family dynamic, where you're willing to move. And if you're in a good spot, which we all three are, you're going to be a little more picky, right? Because you don't have to jump.
Y'all done a good job of doing that.
And you don't have to jump at the first offer. So I think too, being in a great spot, you're going to make a better decision than just hastily going through the process.
Yeah. Here's the question that everyone wants to know from Jared. Jared, will you work at a school not in the Southeastern Conference? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, going to the West right now. Yeah.
I hear you. Well, this is great. I enjoyed this. Y'all are sharp guys, and this is.
You can add on the end of that, you know, got to have a tailgate guys relationship.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly, man, exactly. We appreciate y'all's time.
Thanks, Parker.
Thank you.
All right, thank y'all.